Hi, welcome to my presentation on crisis communication frameworks. I'm Liz Sharpe-Taylor, a communication consultant, and I'm going to share with you steps to take when creating your crisis communication plan specifically for educational institutions. Researchers and scholars have determined colleges and universities can no longer use one-way pathways to communicate with their audiences while in a crisis. Blankston and Blankston found that colleges and universities are unique with regards to challenges they face in preparing for a crisis. According to Blankston and Blankston, colleges and universities must customize their crisis communication frameworks in ways that are unique to an institution's complexity. There is a lot of research behind educational institutions creating a crisis communication plan. Whether it be for violence on campuses or scrutiny on enrollment and recruiting practices, educational institutions need to form a framework for how to deal with a crisis. According to Booker, colleges and universities often write their crisis communication plans after a crisis has occurred, even though it is preferred to be proactive, as proactivity can substantially limit reputational damage. In creating a crisis communication plan, research also shows that an effective crisis communication management plan should address the course of action and identify who can activate the plan, followed by specific action steps. As described in research, here are the 10 best practices to have in creating a crisis communication framework. First, create a crisis communication team and know your institution's policies. This helps with management of a crisis as people understand what they're responsible to do as well as what they're responsible to know during a crisis. 2, understand the types of hazards that can occur. Knowing if the hazard is immediately dangerous versus easily controllable makes a huge difference in communicating the situation. 3, do not fear the public. Your goal is to communicate and reassure them, so treat them as an equal. 4, as an equal, establish a dialogue between the institution and the public. This means opening up all lines of communication. Next, be transparent. If you're at fault, say so with a course of action to remedy the situation. If you're not at fault, say that as well. Then, don't hesitate to have people outside your organization speak on your behalf, because this establishes credibility. Don't shy away from following up with the communications to the media. Remain accessible. For number 8, as with roles, have a spokesperson communicate on behalf of the institution. Then, be comfortable with explaining how you're working to remedy the situation and make sure to communicate you will share details as they arise. Do not fear uncertainty and ambiguity. And finally, let your primary audiences know you're capable of handling and managing and remedying the crisis. When thinking of best practices to include in your crisis communication framework, keep in mind your stakeholders. Your stakeholders can be students, families of students, people who donate to the institution, or businesses that partner with the institution. But they can also be faculty, staff, people who advocate for the institution, people who volunteer for the institution, other organizations that partner with the institution for community and public initiatives. You need to keep the stakeholders in mind because when you're communicating with your targeted audiences, your stakeholders also have a network and they can reinforce your credibility and protect your reputation in their own networks. To prepare the crisis communication framework, several meetings should occur. The first meeting can discuss the importance of having a crisis communication plan, what this means for the institution, and how it's helpful. Then the next meeting can discuss the biggest challenges and potential crises that can happen, as well as what roles are needed to establish to communicate throughout the crisis. Then the next meeting can review the crisis scenarios and identify team members. And the final meeting can bring in all of the people in the crisis communication team, assign them their roles and responsibilities, and discuss messaging to use in each crisis. Here's a short list of what to include in your crisis communication framework. You're going to want to include a communication call tree. This crisis communication call tree is a method to streamline messaging and notify people on the crisis communication team of the crisis. You're also going to want a central command center. This is a location where people on the crisis communication team can meet so that they can discuss how they're going to handle the crisis. This place needs to have phone line accessibility, preferably hard lines, as well as cell phone accessibility and internet connections. Next, you're going to need a way to assess the crisis. In your framework, you should identify what hazard the crisis is and provide documentation or some type of method to say, is the hazard high or is the hazard low? As well as if public outrage is high or is it low? Because this is going to help fuel how you handle a situation. Also, you're going to need a contact list of authorities. You want to make sure that you keep public safety number one priority, and so it's good to have a central location of all of the contact information for the authorities. You're also going to want to have a list of materials. This is include press releases, social media messaging, website communication, and how to change the phone system in the middle of a crisis. So when people call your institution, they know that you are aware of the situation and you're doing everything that you can to remedy it. You're also going to want a list of your third-party advocates that you can call quickly to reinforce your credibility and also help protect your reputation. Create a feedback survey to assess your reputational baseline. This should be done immediately after the framework is accepted. A feedback survey is used to assess the public's views on the institution as well as its strengths and areas of improvement of the institution. It also provides a measuring baseline to help measure the success of your communication as well as the reputational damage after the crisis. It also helps determine the best way to communicate to your target audiences. One last thing, make sure you include legal counsel on your crisis communication team. They can help you assess what messages might be good to use as well as what messages might not be good to use when you're updating your website or updating your social media post or including information in your press release. So it's good when you are finished with your crisis communication framework to run that by legal counsel as well, and then also have legal representation on your team. Here's a list of my references that will also continue on the next page. This slide marks the end of my presentation. Thank you.